All right, welcome back to the TCI studio. Alex and I are going to get you ready for ACC football. We're just about 3 weeks away from going up to Charlotte for the ACC football kickoff. Alex has been doing that since before he was born. So one of the reasons we hired him when we found out he was coming to Clemson, because he had already shown us what he could do at that event for year after year after year. Spent a lot of meals with Alex and his dad when his dad used to take you up to that event. So we're going to get into ACC and who's going to challenge Clemson, but let's just take a little sidebar for you. How special is it for you to go to that event knowing that that was a big part of what got you in this business?
Yeah, I love that event. It's been, one of the things, honestly, probably the consistent thing that I get most excited about every year is going back there, because that was the first big time event that I covered, and I was in 7th grade. And everybody was respectful of me. Nobody treated me any differently, and I'd go to the media socials and drink a Coke with a lime while everybody else is hanging out.
Every single coach that was on the podium, you were always in that room with the electronic media. He asked a question at every single coach. Always had a good question. Alex Dodd Enterprises or Alex Dodd Show was his introduction, and he asked questions, and it was great because in that environment, especially with some of the teams that don't get as much coverage, getting people to ask questions is kind of an issue sometimes. And whoever's up on the podium
it can
sometimes
get kind of
has
quiet
to,
for Syracuse sometimes.
The guy on the podium sometimes has to jump in and ask questions.
It was me and Dan Toratora from Dan Toratora Sports Media.
All right, so Mr. ACC football here. Obviously, we're expecting Clemson to be playing in Charlotte again at the end of the season, like they start the season off. In this segment, we're going to talk about who are the challengers to Clemson to be in that championship game, and is there anybody in the ACC that we think has a legitimate chance to knock Clemson off? So let's start, Alex, with obviously, we got to start we'll start with the Coastal. Who are the teams that you think are going to be battling to be in Charlotte from the Coastal Division?
Well, obviously, everybody's looking at North Carolina with Sam Howell and just the incredible career he's already had at North Carolina under really one of the better coaches in college football, Matt Brown, who doesn't get enough credit for as good of a coach as he is. So everybody's looking there as kind of the front runner in the Coastal Division right now. And then obviously you have Miami, but Miami has a lot of question marks right now because of, is De'Aaron King going to be healthy? Nobody really has a great answer. And if he is healthy, is he going to be the same, escape artist De'Aaron King that he was at times last year, which last year he was kind of a Jekyll and Hyde quarterback to begin with. Some games he comes in and he looks like, a world beater and one of the better quarterbacks in the country. In other games he comes in and looks, pretty average. So those are the two teams that I would say are the front runners in the Coastal Division, and it's really hard for me to see another challenger. I guess Virginia, I think, is always a challenger now in the Coastal, just because I feel like they're really well coached. They're a super disciplined team. They're really bought into Bronco Mendenhall's vision for that program. So they're a team that I think could challenge in the Coastal. But I would say right now North Carolina is the front runner.
All right, give me your pick. North Carolina or Miami? Who's going to be in Charlotte?
I think it'll be North Carolina.
North Carolina. Right.
There are too many question marks about Miami, and who knows, in a month,
right,
Manny Diaz may stand up and be like, De'Aaron, he goes on a run every morning and looks great. Like we have no idea.
But even if he does, last year, like you said, we saw games where he looked great and games where he didn't look great.
Right.
So they're going to need him to look great to be able to beat North Carolina.
And North Carolina's talented. They recruit really well.
They're recruiting very well. Their recruiting's picked up. They're probably going to get a 5-star from Greensboro that Clemson was hoping to get here.
Yeah.
So they're absolutely picking up. I don't think they'll necessarily be at the same level once their quarterback moves on to the NFL. And if you're Florida State, man, you got to be just, Howell is committed down there. You just got to be just dying knowing, hey, we could have had this guy. And that Florida State team that we've seen the last couple of years, if they had Sam on their team, would be very different. I'm going to go with you. I think it'll be North Carolina. I think North Carolina's going to be a top 7 or 8 team in the country this year. They are better. They have the pieces, but they're still North Carolina. So could I see somebody like a Virginia, a Virginia Tech, or somebody beating them during the regular season? I think that's very possible. I think they could certainly slip up to a team other than Miami. But I do think they're, most likely going to be there in Charlotte, and it'll be interesting to see for me how the fan split is. Clemson fans go there every year. North Carolina fans will be thrilled to be back.
Yeah, it'll be like the last time Clemson and North Carolina were there. It was, and North Carolina was ranked, 11th in the country or 10th in the country in that game. It was a great atmosphere for an ACC championship game, and that ended up, going down to the wire in that game. You had the little onside kick, so
it went down the wire way too much.
Yeah.
And that game in Chapel Hill a couple years ago went down to the wire way too much. We remember that.
If Mac Brown was coaching that North Carolina team in the first matchup between Clemson and North Carolina ACC championship, I think it would have been a little scarier than what they had before. But
that's true. All right, so we've got Clemson, we've got North Carolina. Do you think there's any chance North Carolina's at the level yet where they can beat Clemson?
I mean, I think it's hard to say that they couldn't possibly beat Clemson. It's hard to say that because of the last matchup that they had in Chapel Hill. They could possibly do it. Do I think it's going to happen? Do I think it's likely? The answer is no, I don't. I think they have more question marks than people are giving them credit for with guys that left and all that revolving door kind of circuit stuff they had a little bit in the offseason. But I don't think they're at that level yet. Do I think that in a couple years that North Carolina could be at more of that level with the way they're recruiting? I think they could, like a more competitive level with Clemson. I think they're probably the team to look out for in the ACC in terms of
you're not going to give us the Alex Dodd lock that.
I'm not giving you the Alex Terry lock. I can't do that.
No locks.
But I think that can happen. But then the other thing with North Carolina too, though, in terms of the future, is how much longer does Mac Brown have?
Yeah.
How much longer is he going to stay there and coach and lead the program? So it's kind of a catch-22.
Their talent is picking up. I think it's just not across the board. It's not consistent enough, I don't think, to build the depth to compete with Clemson. I'm going to give you the Robert Locke. Clemson will defeat North Carolina. No ands.
Yeah. It's going to happen.
It's going to be a lock.
It's going to happen.
I mean, could North Carolina beat them? No, they're not going to. They're not going to happen.
In the ACC championship game.
In the ACC championship.
No way. I really don't
Also,
think.
now you're going to Alex Dodd lock.
Now,
here we go.
In an ACC championship game, I would say that Clemson will beat North Carolina every time because of the way that Clemson prepares and ramps things up to a different level in postseason.
I talked him into it. Called him out.
You talked me into it.
All right, now the next topic, Alex, is outside of the Coastal, and we'll just talk about the teams Clemson plays, which of course includes Pittsburgh and Georgia Tech from the Coastal. Is there anybody on their schedule before that ACC championship game that can give them a legitimate run fourth quarter where Clemson fans are sweating the last 5 minutes of the game?
Well, I mean, that can always happen. If there's a team that's going to do it, I've heard some people in recent weeks talk about maybe NC State could do that. I just don't see it happening. I don't see NC State being that team that's going to do it. If there was going to be a team that could have an exceptional day when Clemson is, kind of groggy and struggling to get things going, I'd say that probably would be Boston College. Because I think, their quarterback situation is great. I think they're extremely well coached. I think Hafley's an incredible coach. I think Jerkovich is a great quarterback. Mm-hmm. He could probably be the third best quarterback in the ACC this year. That's not a stretch, and could make himself into a future high draft pick if he has a good year. So if there was going to be a team that was going to do it, I would probably say Boston College would be the team that could do it.
All right, I'm going to go a little different than you. I've been looking at the schedule a lot the last week as I'm planning our trips and all that stuff. I'm going to go Pittsburgh. And the reason I'm going to go Pittsburgh is because they're going to play Boston College. Then they've got a bye week. Then they go to Syracuse. Then they turn around that next week and go to Pittsburgh.
It's such a horrible
That's a
month.
back-to-back going up north. Pitt has their quarterback back, right?
Yeah, Kenny Pickett.
He's in that probably maybe top 5 or 6 quarterbacks in the league. And they're just a team that, kind of like Miami, been Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde. They're games where they actually are pretty competitive and pretty strong. There are other games where they're not at that same level. So just because of the schedule and the back-to-back travels, although obviously that Syracuse game's a Friday night, so you got a little bit of extra, you got an extra day in there, but still back-to-back long trips. If you're not if they're not listening to Dabo's every week, it's the biggest game of the year. The next opponent's the biggest game of the year. All of that mantra that we'll hear for the next 4 months over and over. We could probably give the speech in our sleep. But just because of the schedule, I think that's a game that could be closer than people think.
Yeah, I definitely think, Kenny Pickett is, like you said, Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde. Some weeks he looks really good. Really, the first half of last year, everybody was all about Kenny Pickett. And really, then he came to Clemson, and we saw kind of how that worked with the interceptions and everything. Schematically, I just don't know with Pitt. The way that their offense works, I don't think that they would be able to do it to Clemson, and they lost some key pieces on that good defense that they had last year, so I don't know if it could be Pitt.
But you know how Pittsburgh is about fans, Steelers, the Pittsburgh Panthers.
Do they wave
They
towels?
always fill the stadium up there? No, they don't. You hear that, Will? There won't be any terrible towels. Might be more fans. There might be more fans at the Pitt Clemson game that weekend than there are at the Pittsburgh Steelers game.
And there'll
probably
be
most
more
of them will be
people
wearing
wearing
orange. Exactly. So.
You don't think South Carolina is going to be the team that gives Clemson a run for their money this year?
Gosh, neither one of us
Shane Beamer?
mentioned that. Yeah, we didn't talk about the other out of conference games, of course, but no.
UConn?
No,
UConn?
I don't think that's the case. I think South Carolina is headed towards many more years where they're hoping, wishing this time of year, if we could just get back to Shreveport and go back to the Independence Bowl. That would be such an awesome season. There's a guy in the media that actually carries a book bag from the Independence Bowl.
Yes.
Which is just...
The Clemson media.
Why would you do that? He's been to playoff games with Clemson. He has other book bags that are given out. He's a little bit of a South Carolina fan for those that probably can't figure it out. But he wears a book bag from the Independence Bowl. So Bart and I did a great video. It's on YouTube. Go look at it. We were driving through Shreveport on the way to Dallas. Great funny video about that city. Hopefully my daughter doesn't end up working there because that's a potential location for her down the line.
Well, hopefully
her
the
new job.
Chamber of Commerce is not watching. If it is,
it's like, okay, well, that's not
it's
happening.
a different Robert, not Molly's dad.
Different person altogether. All right, folks, that's a look at this coming season from an ACC perspective. Always some unknowns, always some things happen that you don't expect. Hopefully all of these games, home and away, will be full of fans and things will be back to normal. And we'll have tons of stuff to talk about every Saturday and Sunday about what happened on the field in the conference. So stay tuned to the Clemson Insider. We'll have the most complete coverage for you of Clemson athletics, Clemson recruiting, and Clemson football.